Senator Ted Cruz leaving the stage, and you heard the cacophony at the conclusion of his remarks. We're interested in what you have to say about that speech. We'll be taking your calls momentarily at 1-877-Newsmax, 1-877-639-7629. I am joined on the anchor desk by former Congressional Chief of Staff Glen Downs, who worked so capably for Congressman Walter B. Jones. Glen, to my ear, it started with such promise and poignancy. We had a disruption in the feed. We heard the appeal, please don't stay home in November, but then the phrase, vote your conscience. No mention that I heard of Donald Trump or a specific endorsement.
Well, I didn't hear it either. He began by congratulating Mr. Trump by name, but then went into this general exposition about constitutional and freedom and the like that everybody heard. I don't think Ted Cruz did himself any good with that speech. I don't think that it will impact Mr. Trump's ability to be elected very much one way or the other, but I think that didn't help Ted Cruz at all. So comparing it, as you did earlier, potentially to that Reagan speech in '76, there was a pretty bright contrast there between the reaction of the audience, the reaction of the convention goers, and the full-throatedness of Mr. Reagan's endorsement of President Ford back in '76 versus what you heard here. So it's disappointing, I think, for a lot of people, I think.
One who was there in the hall, we welcome in from Cleveland. We are pleased to welcome in the former New York City Police Commissioner, Bernie Kerik, the author of the book From Jailer to Jailed. Bernie, I've got to ask you, you were there to hear it. As Ted Cruz was concluding his remarks, what was the reaction of the crowd since you're there in person?
Well, they went crazy. I think it's sad. Laura Ingraham put it best earlier. These guys that made this pledge to support the nominee, they got to, grow up. I mean, it's kind of sickening. And the bottom line is, they're not doing anything to unite this party and bring people together. In fact, they're fragmenting it, and I think it's disgusting for the country.
Bernie, you are a law enforcement officer. When I was serving in politics, I joked about the fact that I was not an attorney, and I thought it was an advantage. And so here is the spectacle of Ted Cruz, national debating champion at Princeton, Harvard Law graduate, first-rate intellect, an ability to convey a message, and yet, as a lawyer, leaving out specific language about supporting the party's presidential nominee.
Yeah, you know what, JD, it's kind of hard to hear you, but I got to tell you, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that, with his speech, I'm disappointed with the others that should be here. It's disappointing, but I have to say the energy is enormous, is great. I was extremely impressed with Laura Ingraham's comments, what she had to say, and I think we're going to hear some great stuff coming out of Eric and Newt Gingrich to come tonight.
And we will be standing by for those speeches. Let me turn to Glen Downs again here on the anchor desk as the band plays. It is a bit tough for Bernie to hear. Right. But going back to the parsing of terms, when you're on the stump with the passion of a political convention, succumbing to the temptation to, in a lawyerly fashion, parse words and omit key phrases. That's the frustration I feel tonight after hearing Senator Cruz.
Well, obviously, if you listen to the reaction of the crowd, that attempt to split the baby didn't work very well. And obviously, the reality of the situation is, if he thought Donald Trump was a better candidate than him, he wouldn't have run in the first place. So obviously, he'd be disappointed by the fact that he's not the nominee and Mr. Trump is. But the political reality is, realpolitik, is the choice now is between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And if you can't make a full-throated endorsement of Trump relative to Hillary Clinton, I'm not sure what good your speech was.
It is a little past 10 o'clock on the East Coast. This is Newsmax TV's continuing coverage of the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. Let's return to Convention Hall and Bernie Kerik. Bernie, we are hearing that the presumptive, well, no, he is technically now the nominee, having won the vote in the roll call of states. We are hearing that Donald Trump is in the building tonight. Have you seen any evidence of Mr. Trump being there?
Well, somebody just passed me coming in. It could have been him. There was a major entourage coming onto the floor, so there's a good chance he may be here.
And of course, Eric Trump will speak momentarily. There he is. We have the shot now from the box as the musical entertainment continues. Let us go to the phones because we're interested in hearing what you have to say at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. To Athens, Georgia. Eric is on the line. Eric, welcome to Newsmax TV.
Well, thank you. I just want to say that I'm very disappointed in Ted Cruz, and he's an example of what's happening in this country. Ted Cruz, the Bushes, all of them have lied. They stood on a stage and gave their word that they would support the Republican nominee, and they have not done it. This is what's creating the problem in this country, and it's why the people like me are fed up. I'm a Vietnam vet. And let me tell you something, I loved Ronald Reagan. And when Ronald Reagan ran, the Republican establishment and all of the media were against him just like they are against Donald Trump. And I think it's time that the American people stood up, and I hope this is going to be the year that they really get their act together and exercise their constitutional power of throwing these guys out, because this is just ridiculous the way these establishment politicians are acting.
Eric, I want to say, and I think I'm speaking on behalf of everyone watching, we thank you for your service in Vietnam, and we thank you for your viewpoint tonight. Thank you, sir. 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. Glen Downs, we've been around politics a long time.
Right.
We mentioned the fact you were a Reagan delegate to that 1976 convention in Kansas City. Eric was pointing out the frustration that you and I have seen and measured both inside Washington and outside in terms of grassroots voters. Will this redound to Mr. Trump's benefit?
Well, frankly, I think to people who are actual swing voters, not disgruntled Republican establishment figures, the fact that you've got the establishment refusing to acknowledge the reality that the largest number of votes any Republican nominee ever got in the primary process went to Donald Trump, that Mr. Trump won the nomination fair and square. No one's saying he's cheated or anything like that. The fact is just the fact that grassroots chose Trump, an outsider over the insiders, probably does reinforce his standing.
And the voice of the people tonight on that floor, the grassroots people. Let's go back to Bernie Kerik from the convention hall. Bernie, I just have to ask you, when Senator Cruz departed from his remarks with a slice of rhetorical flattery for the New York delegation, what were the words being chanted in response to Senator Cruz? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard USA and Donald Trump, and he didn't get much of an applause on his exit, so I think that's pretty telling. JD, there's one thing I got to say before I get off of here, and that is I want to give a shout out to the men and women in the Cleveland Police Department, Secret Service. I've been to a number of these things around the country, major events like this. They have done a tremendous job in securing the city, securing the convention, the inner ring, the outer ring. Tremendous work by them and all the state police agencies, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Florida. They've come from all over the states. Big kudos to the law enforcement community for what they're doing here.
And given your background in law enforcement, and the kudos you're sending out, what has impressed you the most about the security presence and the way things are running in Cleveland, Bernie?
Extremely professional. I actually got to see a reaction team respond to some protesters today down in one of the squares. They were in and out. They diminished the problem within like 10-15 minutes. It was over, removed the instigators. Everything went back to normal. No violence, no screaming, no yelling. Super professional. Very well done. And that's across the board, inside and outside of the convention.
Bernie, we know that law enforcement officials remain vigilant. What does your gut tell you? Do you think the street agitators will try some big push, perhaps tomorrow night when Mr. Trump makes the speech accepting the nomination?
Well, usually that's the day that sort of all the goblins come out. So I think we'll see that tomorrow. But I have to tell you, the way the law enforcement community has responded here, the way they have their limits of protection, I think I don't think they're going to have any problems. I think it's extremely secure.
In the wake of the cop killings, when Donald Trump on the stump in Virginia stepped up, and he since reiterated this, when Mr. Trump has said, "I am the law and order candidate," is that the argument that you believe will help him in this campaign?
I think it is, and I think if you're a veteran, if you're a law enforcement officer, I don't see how you could not vote for Donald Trump. I just don't see it. We've had 100% increase this year over last year in officers being gunned down and murdered in this country. 100% increase as of today versus last year. We don't need another 4 years of that or another 8 years. We need new leadership, and I think you're going to see that in Donald Trump.
Let's go back to the phones at 1-877-639-7629. That's 1-877-Newsmax. And we go to America's 49th state, Alaska, the capital city of Juneau. That's where William joins us. Hi, William.
Hi, how are you all doing?
Fine, sir.
So I'm very disappointed in Senator Ted Cruz's speech. I think it started well, and he had a real opportunity to do the right thing for our party. Instead, he disenfranchised myself and millions of other voters across the nation. Trump is our guy. We clearly chose Trump. And, you know, I'd also like to say these politicians have put more effort into fighting Donald Trump than they ever put into fighting President Obama. And if Trump loses, I blame these folks.
Well, let me just offer this. I understand the disappointment, but you're not disenfranchised because you still have the vote, and Alaska's electoral votes can end up in the Trump column. Do you believe among your friends and neighbors there in Juneau and elsewhere in that huge expanse of our nation's largest state that people are going to rally to Trump given the disappointment that you experienced listening to the words of Ted Cruz tonight?
Sir, you can count on it.
And on that hopeful note, William, we thank you for calling tonight from Juneau, Alaska. Bernie, let me ask you this, Bernie Kerik. You've been around politics, even though you're part and parcel of law enforcement and making a case for judicial reform and prison reform in this country. But just politically in this moment, in your opinion, has Ted Cruz, for all intents and purposes, extinguished any ambitions for the White House given what he had to say tonight and his reception, or the reception that the delegates gave him at the conclusion of his message?
I think it's finished. I got to be honest. You know, forget about the White House in the future. I think his position with the party is going to be diminished. I think many others' position with the party is going to be diminished. And if, you know, God forbid Donald Trump does not win this election, if he doesn't, those people should be held responsible because they should have come forward. They should have, you know, followed their promise, followed their pledge, united the party, supported the nominee, and I think it's just a shame that they don't have the courage, the common sense, and the upright decency to do what they were supposed to do.
And Bernie, of course, the Cruz speech tonight stands in stark contrast to the speech last night by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. I haven't had a chance to ask you about that, so with 30 seconds remaining, Chris Christie offering that political indictment of Mrs. Clinton last night, was that effective?
I think it was effective. I think, I don't think he said anything that we didn't see with the FBI director. If you followed the FBI director's comments 3 weeks ago when he talked about their investigation, he made it exceptionally clear that there were violations of law, that there were violations of the classification acts. Them choosing not to indict or not to charge, nobody can explain that. But I think Chris Christie just expounded on what the FBI director has already said.
Bernie, Kerik, we thank you for expounding on the scene there on the convention floor tonight. Thank you very much, sir. Our thanks also to Glen Downs. We're coming back with more.